Hello, fellow audio engineers and music producers. My name's Adam. This is Real Home Recording. Today I'm going to be answering some questions about sound engineering. Recently, A Months in Audio posted this question over on Facebook, and I figured I'd be the one to answer these questions. Although I'm not a retired sound engineer, and I definitely have not been doing this for 30 years, I think I can answer at least a few of these questions. So let's get started. What's the best way to record for transparent sounding mixes? Well, if that's not a loaded question to begin this Q&A segment, I don't know what is. But the first thing you need to address is your audio monitoring situation, because if what you're hearing is not accurate, everything else doesn't matter. So these days, for the money, I recommend the Slate VSX system. It's a headphone/software solution that essentially it simulates what professional level studios would have. The most important thing you need is a somewhat transparent headphone amp, which can be found on most modern audio interfaces. So once you have that addressed, VSX is, to me, the solution to, bad acoustics, affordable, or I should say, cheap studio speakers. All these problems that home studios used to deal with are taken care of by VSX. Now, there are cheaper solutions out there, and if you already own a pair of headphones, you may want to check them out. One of them is Hornet plugins. They have their VHS system, and Waves has their NX system, although I caution you about purchasing Waves plugins because of their Waves update plugin program issue. And we also have Acoustica Audio's Sienna series. All these solutions essentially try to create a speaker sound with headphones. Some of them do it better than others, but again, try these for yourself. And once you address that, I would say the first issue is your room acoustics for recording. Now, I personally prefer a dry sounding room, which is what this is right here. So if I clap right now, very little echo. There's no spring to it. It's just a nice dry clap echo. Whenever I go into a new room to record, the first thing I do is I clap because I want to hear what those first reflections are, because those first reflections are going to end up on your recording. So I like this room as a good standard. It's an attic, so it has a wall. It has ceilings that go like this, and it's about, I want to say, 12 feet wide by maybe 23 feet long, and the ceiling is about 8 feet high. Great little room to record in. It's not nice looking, but it's a good dry room to record in, and then from there you can add artificial reverb to enhance your audio. But as far as clarity is concerned and transparency, you can't beat a good condenser microphone. Now, I'm right now using a good large diaphragm dynamic microphone with a clear preamp booster, but for all intents and purposes, this is probably not a good microphone for recording things like violin and acoustic guitar and drum cymbals, anything with higher frequencies, anything with fast transients. Now, for a voice, it's awesome. I love dynamic microphones for voiceovers, for singing, but for music, a nice condenser microphone. My first recommendation, if you're on a low budget, is the SE Electronics SE7. I have two of them. SE Electronics sent me those microphones, just like they sent me this microphone right here. But look, they're good sounding microphones. I recommend them. They're $100 a piece. I think they're a little bit more expensive now because of inflation and all that, but you can buy a matched pair for about, I believe, $220 these days. Once upon a time, they were $199, but that's no longer the case. The SE8 are also good. If you have more money, the Neumann, oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. The Neumann, I'll put it on screen. How about that? Those little ones are nice. So your small diaphragm condenser microphones are typically more affordable than large diaphragm. But yeah, condenser microphones for me is the way to go for transparent recordings that sound closer to reality than a dynamic microphone. Nothing wrong with dynamic microphones for their purposes. Drums, again, voice, and anything that doesn't require fast transients and maybe even sound better with slower transients. But if I only had one microphone type to record with, it would be small diaphragm condenser. And there's one other thing I want to check my notes on this question, and really that's about it. If you can afford a nice equalizer to go with your setup, then that will help you get transparent recordings, because if the goal is to have the best quality going into your analog to digital converter, then an equalizer is almost a must-have. Compressor is cool to have, but I would say if you have a choice, if you only can buy one, I would get an equalizer. And now that's not if you're a newbie. And again, that's not if your monitoring situation isn't taken care of. But if you're using Slate VSX or the IK Multimedia iLoud speakers, along with ARC for room measurements, or Sound ID from SonarWorks, one of those room correction solutions, then you're pretty much good to go. But with everything else, unless your monitoring is taken care of, you'll struggle, I should say, getting a good, transparent, natural, clean sounding recording right from the get-go. Next question. How do you separate bass drum and bass guitar in the mix so they can be clearly heard individually? Okay. This is actually a topic that I didn't think it was that complicated, but well, I guess it kind of is when you think about it. I mean, once you have the experience, it's easy. But to answer the question, so number one, you need to put some good compressors on both of those instruments, because when you record either kick drum or bass guitar, both of those instruments tend to just not be nice and even with the volume. It's just very hard to play both those instruments perfectly evenly. So a compressor is essential, number one. An equalizer that will pull out the low end, allow you to cut. Okay, so let me go back. So the kick drum. Kick drum's fundamental frequency is anywhere between about 50 to, let's say, 80 hertz. That's where I want to boost. The bass guitar, I want to boost around maybe 100 to 120 hertz. And that range keeps the bass guitar and the kick drum separate from one another. On the kick drum, I always like to reduce around the 400 hertz area, usually, not all the time, and also maybe around the 250 hertz area, just to declutter the kick drum. Because again, the kick drum it really needs that low end subwoofer. Now, as far as the harmonics from the kick drum, this is important. So the harmonics in the kick drum actually lie somewhere around 4 to 8 kilohertz is where I normally would boost it, and that will get you that click noise, and that'll really just make the kick drum stand out even on laptop or smartphone speakers. Now for the bass guitar, the fundamental harmonic is actually right around the 800 to 1.2 kilohertz region. So I'll typically boost that area. Now for some reason, and that reason may be because the notes on the bass guitar were all on the thickest string, we'll say, you need to make something called a harmonics generator on your track to generate those upper harmonics, because otherwise they're not going to be there. Now, the old trick back in the day was to make some distortion. What I would do is put an 1176 compressor in the off mode position, crank that SOB up on a separate track, on a parallel track, and then that would be the harmonics generated. There's other ways to do that, but there's plugins that specifically do that. Renaissance Bass from Waves, they were one of the first ones to do it with their Max Bass plugin, and then Renaissance Bass was the upgrade to that. But ever since then, there's a plugin called Noor that I like to use. Acoustica Audio also put out a Fire the Bass plugin that generates bass harmonics, or I should say mid-range harmonics from bass instruments. There's other ones that can do this as well, but those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But very good question. Oh, another thing you can do. So with a compressor, you want to trigger the bass guitar on the side chain with the kick drum so that the bass guitar dips down in volume just a hair whenever the kick drum hits. And that just allows those two instruments to, blend together a lot easier. I don't do that trick as much these days because, again, I think I'm pretty darn good at EQing and compressing and keeping them separate. But if for some reason the kick drum is just not working with the bass guitar, you can either, again, side chain it, or you can replace it with a drum sample replacement software. The one that I use is called Slate Trigger. But I hope that answers the question. What song was so beautiful it brought you to tears? Okay, so I don't have a particular song. I have a few songs that come to mind when I think of this question. One of those is Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. Another one is a newer one, Deathbed by Powfu. Eric Clapton's Tears in Heaven. And then this one, man, this one hit me when I was driving one day. I was listening to the radio and they put Scorpions' Wind of Change on. And I almost had to pull my car to the side of the road because it just hit me. It hit me in the chest. It hit me in the tear duct. Those 4 songs, they get me every single time. What made you get into sound engineering? So this one, 2 instances in my life. Number one, I think it was Christmas or my birthday, one of those two, my parents bought me a radio that had a cassette recorder in it, and it also had a built-in little condenser microphone. I just was like, wow, I can record myself and there's my voice. And then I learned to slow the tape down. And then if you do that, so basically you hold the pause button on this thing while it's recording, and it would allow you to record a chipmunk voice. And, I was hooked from then on. A few years after that, I started doing what's now known as a podcast. We called it an internet radio show back then. And I started recording those with my friends, just doing a bunch of little skits, talking about news, what have you. And then eventually I started recording music. I think somewhere around 2000 I recorded my first bit of music, and then I didn't record again until like the year 2006, 2007. But I would say I really, really got into audio engineering, like seriously, in the year 2008, certainly 2009. Both those years, I bought so many books on the topic, made sure I knew what the heck I was doing, because I was tasked with mixing and recording 2 albums, and I wanted it to sound as best as I could. And it snowballed from there. And I love recording sound, because especially high quality audio, because there's nothing like playing something back that you did and watching it years from there, years from after you recorded it, and you're like, wow, I recorded that, and that's what my voice used to sound like, and that's the thoughts in my head at that moment in my life. And then to pass that gift of knowledge on to musicians who want to also have a awesome record of their historical record, really, of their music. They love it. They love it. I love it. That's what got me into sound engineering. I'm going to do one more question, and then I'm actually going to do another video at another point. Why does the sound go from blaring to so soft that you can barely hear it in the same movie? This is a big pet peeve of mine with Hollywood mixes. Because, look, I understand the, want to excite the audience with volume dynamics. I get it. But do you really have to make it 12 decibels or more of dynamics? Do you really need to make your explosion that much louder? No. More than anything, it's caused divorces, it's caused arguments, people have woken up and the dog starts barking. I mean, you got all kinds of problems with these volume fluctuations. Look, I love dynamic audio like anybody else out there. You know, I am definitely against the loudness wars and hyper compression. But when it comes to movie mixing, I don't know why they don't just, you know, maybe do like a 6 decibel variation of dynamics. Just something where there's a little bit of difference. But man, when you watch these movies, and it's not just the explosions, like the music kicks in. And again, it's like 12 decibels or more louder than the dialogue. And you're like, what are these people thinking? Like, why do you got to do that to the audience? And, you know, I don't get it personally. But the reason is because when they intentionally do that. They intentionally do that because they figure that people want an exciting experience at the movies. And unfortunately, that typically does not translate well to the home. And the other unfortunate thing is not all home audio gear has built-in dynamic range compression. And even if it does, it doesn't always work that great. I know people who actually they strap stereo compressors, like hardware compressors for professional recording studios, onto their audio outputs to take care of that problem. Hey, do what you got to do. But yeah, I don't like it. Just like you don't like it. It could be fixed. I wish that they would, again, mix just with maybe 6 decibels of dynamics at the most. Maybe even, I was going to say 9, but 9's too much. 6 decibels, maybe 8 would be pushing it, but definitely 6 decibels of variation would keep the arguments at bay. So anyway, thank you all for watching this. If you have any questions for me for the next video, leave them below.